A woman named Nina, whose financial condition was rather modest, experienced an unpleasant incident one day. When Nina had just left the supermarket, a luxury car accidentally splashed water onto the clothes she was wearing. The car's driver then got out to apologize, but Nina continued to express her anger. Even though the driver offered to compensate for the soiled clothes, Nina remained unwilling to accept the offer. Upon arriving at the apartment, Nina met her husband, Alexander, a Mandarin language lecturer and travel agency employee. That day, they received a bill that had accumulated interest due to late payment. Although they were financially strained, Alexander decided to invite Nina for a short vacation. Alexander hoped that by taking a break, they could refresh their minds and find a solution to pay off the bill. On the other hand, the story shifts to Sergei, the man involved in the water splashing incident earlier. Sergei, along with his wife Tamara and their child, lived in a large house and enjoyed a life of luxury. However, abundant wealth does not always guarantee happiness. Tamara often felt lonely due to Sergei's busy schedule. Tamara's dissatisfaction with the lack of attention from Sergei led to minor arguments between them. A few days later, Alexander carried out his teaching activities as usual. Nina, who was also a student in the class Alexander taught, engaged in a conversation with her friend, Larissa. They discussed Nina's fortune in marrying Alexander, who was both handsome and intelligent. Although Nina realized that a wealthy husband does not always guarantee happiness, she still loved Alexander sincerely despite their financial difficulties. After the class ended, Alexander received a job offer as a Mandarin translator at a company. Since Alexander had other work that day, he suggested that Nina take his place as the translator. Although Nina was initially hesitant because this would be her first job, she accepted her husband's suggestion for the sake of their financial needs. Nina then arrived at the company and was surprised to find out that the boss was Sergei, the man she had scolded some time ago. Sergei was initially displeased with the replacement of the translator, especially since the replacement was a woman he considered rude and stubborn. However, his personal assistant explained that the meeting with the Chinese company boss was urgent, leaving them with no other option. During the meeting, Nina performed her duties well and managed to make the Chinese boss feel comfortable and friendly towards Sergei's company. In the end, they celebrated the meeting's success by enjoying themselves together. Luck came to Nina when Sergei handed her 2 chips. Nina placed the chips on numbers that rarely came up, and as a result, she won 700 chips. Nevertheless, Nina viewed the game merely as entertainment. Without considering the value of the chips, she recklessly bet all she had and eventually lost. Nina's careless actions left Sergei puzzled, unable to understand her motivation. After the Chinese boss left the event, Nina and Sergei continued by playing bowling. This activity helped to break the ice and ease the awkwardness between them. Sergei's personal assistant then suggested that Sergei invite Nina to a hotel, hoping that Sergei could experience what it means to be a boss who not only deals with documents and stocks but also interacts with women more personally. This suggestion led Sergei to think about ways to get closer to Nina. They went for dinner at a luxury restaurant, but Sergei remained awkward and uncomfortable in his communication, relying solely on his habit of speaking directly, a common practice he used with his subordinates. With full confidence, Sergei invited Nina to a hotel to continue their conversation. However, this invitation made Nina feel disrespected, as she was a woman who valued herself. Feeling insulted, Nina immediately excused herself to leave. Knowing that Nina still had debt at his bank, Sergei used his wealth's influence to remind her that if she ever needed money or luxury, all she had to do was contact him. Upon arriving at the apartment, Nina shared her success as a translator and also her big win at the roulette table, where she managed to win $7,000 from a $200 bet, even though she did not cash out her winnings. Her husband, Alexander, could not understand Nina's decision to squander such a large sum and became highly frustrated, believing himself to be the most deserving party in their household. Alexander's dissatisfaction with Nina's attitude began to influence her view of her husband, causing her to start considering Sergei's offer. The next day, Nina told Larissa about Sergei. Sergei offered her a life of luxury, which made Nina consider accepting the offer. However, seeing how hard Alexander worked to meet their needs, Nina felt conflicted. On one hand, she needed money to help her husband pay off their debt, but on the other hand, she did not want to compromise her principles. A few days later, the bank sent a warning letter about the potential foreclosure of their apartment if the debt was not settled soon. Alexander explained that the only way to repay the debt was by taking out another loan in Nina's name, as Alexander's name was already blacklisted by all the banks. However, Nina was reluctant to take on another loan. In the afternoon, Nina decided to contact Sergey and ask for his help. They met at a hotel, and as Nina explained her problem, Sergey quickly contacted the bank to request a delay in interest charges as well as a reduction in the interest on Nina and Alexander's debt. Nina was surprised to see that Sergey genuinely wanted to help her and wasn't merely looking to toy with her. Sergey clarified that if Nina did not like him, they didn't need to sleep together, and his kindness wasn't dependent on that. Nina was taken aback by Sergey's sincerity and felt moved by his goodwill. That night, Nina voluntarily decided to accept Sergey's offer to have fun together. Afterward, she returned home feeling exhausted. Alexander, who kept talking about their debt and the possible relief they might receive, seemed unaware of Nina's helplessness. Noticing Nina's lack of energy, she immediately went to her room, while Alexander assumed her fatigue was due to her studying and working all day. Meanwhile, at Sergey's house, Tamara grew suspicious of her husband. The scent of a woman's perfume on Sergey's clothes deepened her feeling of neglect, as Sergey spent less and less time with the family. That night, they even slept in separate rooms. The next day, Sergey called Nina and asked her to come to the hotel where they had last met. Nina, however, refused the invitation and stated that what happened yesterday would be the last time between them. Nonetheless, Sergey insisted that he would wait for her at the hotel, even if she did not come. Unexpectedly, Larissa called Nina and invited her and Alexander to her birthday party. However, Alexander, overwhelmed with work, asked Nina to go alone. For reasons unknown, instead of attending her friend's event, Nina went to the hotel where Sergey was staying. They spent the day indulging in activities and planned to do it again the following day. Every evening, Nina would tell her husband that she was going to the library to study, but in reality, she was spending time with Sergey. One day, Sergey received news that his child was ill and was unable to continue his routine with Nina. Nina, who had been waiting at the hotel since the afternoon, felt devastated and neglected. These feelings unconsciously followed her home, causing Alexander to become puzzled by Nina's frequent daydreaming in solitary outings. During her time alone, Nina would often stalk Sergey from a distance. Whether this was love or obsession was unclear, but it turned Nina into a sullen person, worrying Alexander and leading him to take her to a doctor. The doctor explained that Nina was physically healthy but likely experiencing emotional turmoil and stress affecting her well-being. Eventually, Nina could no longer bear the internal conflict. She confessed to Alexander that she had slept with someone else, expressing deep regret and promising never to do it again. Alexander, upon hearing this confession, responded with overwhelming anger, became physically aggressive, and refused to listen to Nina's explanation that she did it to help pay off their debt. As a result, Nina decided to leave their apartment. Nina then contacted Sergey, informing him that she had separated from her husband and had no place to stay. Sergey quickly met with Nina and bought her a luxurious apartment. From that moment, their relationship became increasingly intense. Tamara, feeling frustrated, warned Nina that Sergey still had a wife and child who loved him and urged her to end their affair. On the other hand, Alexander spent his days drinking and coping with his disappointment by sleeping with Larissa, Nina's close friend. As time passed, Nina became increasingly dependent on Sergey and desired full control over him. She became impulsive, constantly calling Sergey and visiting him at his office, which made Sergey uncomfortable, yet he knew this was a consequence of his own actions. One night, when Nina was expecting Sergey to come to her apartment, the doorbell rang. Upon opening the door, Nina was shocked to see a somber-looking Alexander forcing his way in. Still feeling entitled as Nina's husband, Alexander compelled her to serve him. The next day, Nina revealed to Sergey that she was pregnant with his child. This left Sergey even more confused, and he asked for time to think. When Sergey arrived home, he was immediately confronted by Tamara with questions about the decision he would make regarding their marriage and his affair. Sergey could only be honest with his wife and hoped that Tamara would understand the situation. However, Tamara could not tolerate her husband's behavior and the news of his mistress's pregnancy. In the end, Tamara decided to separate from her husband, Sergey. After a year had passed, Nina was now living with Sergey and chose to care for their child. Meanwhile, Alexander experienced a significant downturn in his life. Due to his bad behavior, Alexander often became a target of abuse by unknown individuals. Currently, Alexander is living with Larissa in her apartment. One day, Larissa informed Alexander that Nina had invited her to an event. Larissa also mentioned that the relationship between Nina and Sergei was not harmonious. Perhaps Nina now felt the same way Tamara did before, often left alone while Sergei was preoccupied with work and rarely spent time at home. Hearing this, Alexander remained unfazed and focused more on continuing his studies at Harvard. Several years later, Nina's child had grown considerably. Alexander attended an event with an appearance that reflected success. At the event, Nina and Sergei were also present. Upon meeting her ex-husband, Nina approached Alexander and greeted him, while Sergei seemed indifferent and irritated by Alexander's presence. Lately, Sergei has been constantly preoccupied with his phone, prioritizing business over Nina. During this time, Nina expressed that her relationship with Sergei was not going well. Nina realized that Sergei did not marry her out of love, and although Sergei is still bound by marriage, the feelings of love have faded. Their marriage was built on honor and professionalism, not genuine love. Hearing this, Alexander took the opportunity to persuade Nina to come back to him. Nina seemed to accept Alexander's offer and agreed to start getting to know each other again. They spent time together at a hotel, where Alexander confessed that he still deeply loved Nina and hoped they could reconcile. However, Nina rejected the proposal, viewing love as irrelevant. Her focus now is on achieving success and avoiding the poverty she once experienced. And that concludes our story for today. See you in the next video.